We must each learn to respect boundaries, all boundaries without failing. Human life is all about relationships, which are many and varied. Let us look at the husband and wife relationship, which is the first human relationship created by God at the Garden of Eden. And because the first woman Eve desired to have more than God had allowed her and her husband, Adam, to have, the husband and wife committed sin, and sin tore the world apart and brought Satan into our lives and homes permanently. Did God not give to Adam and Eve everything, that they began to desire something more? Not at all. Let us, together, see what God said on this matter. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." 27 So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. 28 God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." 29 Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food." 30 And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. 31 God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Genesis 1 verses 26 to 31 NIV. We see that God had given our common ancestors, Adam and Eve, everything they needed for a happy and successful life on the earth. He gave them everything so they could be contented. Why did they get into sin by desiring something more? Eve was tempted by the devil, whom she and Adam were warned by God to never approach for any reason whatsoever. Genesis 2 verse 17 NIV, or destroy. Themselves, in the same exact way witnesses and jurors are warned in our courtrooms by the judge, not to approach the accused until their case is concluded. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden." 17 But you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it you will certainly die. Genesis 2 verses 16 to 17 NIV. But not even the warning about death at the instant of their sinning discouraged the woman, Eve, from engaging the devil in a conversation to satisfy her curiosity. What was this extra thing Eve longed for that made Eve believe the devil and decide to try it out in Genesis 3 verse 6? Eve sought to be equal with God in wisdom. According to James 1 verse 14, Eve was tempted when Eve was dragged away by Eve's own evil desire and enticed. Evil desires never fail to drag people away and entice them into sinning. What gets us into sin is not temptation. It is desiring something we are prohibited to have or have insufficient means to obtain for ourselves that brings temptations and makes us sin. Temptation never invites itself to anyone. Evidence. Jesus Christ allowed himself to be led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil after his baptism by John the Baptist, Matthew 4 verse 1, to demonstrate to all human beings that God had prepared all human beings to successfully resist temptations, 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13 NIV, and still stand. Therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Ephesians 6 verse 13. We, each, invite temptation by desiring things we were prohibited by God to desire, like desiring to have sexual relations with a married woman or desiring things we do not have sufficient means to obtain for ourselves. Everyone's desire for something they were prohibited to have or cannot afford to obtain for themselves is everyone's biggest problem in life. Such desire is evil and always brings one into temptations. James 4 verses 1 to 10. Jesus Christ said, "Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. Such things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come." Why must the things that make people stumble come? Things that make people stumble come to test every one of us, to demonstrate to God and God's loyal angels that we are not behaving like Satan, who is under God's judgment for seizing every opportunity to take what belonged to others and bullying them thus, constantly blurring boundaries and promoting sin and wickedness. Isaiah 14 verses 16 to 17 NIV. On the day the Lord gives you relief from your suffering and turmoil and from the harsh labor forced on you, for you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon, how the oppressor has come to an end, how his fury has ended. 5. The Lord has broken the rod of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers. 6. Which in anger struck down peoples with unceasing blows, and in fury subdued nations with relentless aggression. 7. All the lands are at rest and at peace. They break into singing. 8. Even the junipers and the cedars of Lebanon gloat over you and say, now that you have been laid low, no one comes to cut us down. 9. The realm of the dead below is all astir to meet you at your coming. It rouses the spirits of the departed to greet you, all those who were leaders in the world. It makes them rise from their thrones, all those who were kings over the nations. 10. They will all respond. They will say to you, you also have become weak, as we are. You have become like us. 11. All your pomp has been brought down to the grave, along with the noise of your harps. Maggots are spread out beneath you, and worms cover you. 12. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. 13. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the Mount of Assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. 14. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. 15. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. 16. Those who see you stare at you. They ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble? 17. The man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let his captives go home? 18. All the kings of the nations lie in state, each in his own tomb. 19. But you are cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch. You are covered with the slain, with those pierced by the sword, those who descend to the stones of the pit, like a corpse trampled underfoot. 20. You will not join them in burial, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. Let the offspring of the wicked never be mentioned again. 21. Prepare a place to slaughter his children for the sins of their ancestors. They are not to rise to inherit the land and cover the earth with their cities. Isaiah 14 verses 3 to 21 NIV. Jesus Christ declared in John 15 verse 27 that every one of us must testify to God's righteousness by promptly blocking evil desires from taking resident in our respective minds. That we must each promptly remove ourselves from things that can bring temptations into our respective lives, just as God had commanded Cain in Genesis 4 verse 7 NIV. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Since we are all witnesses for God against the devil's wickedness, John 15 verse 27, etc. God had prepared every one of us for tough cross-examination by the devil in the appeal hearing that has been going on in God's heavenly courtroom since the world began, for which God had set the last day to render his verdict against all wickedness and remove all that was vile and tainted with sin from the world. The devil blurred all boundaries and did as he liked, which prompted God to kick the devil out of heaven, Luke 10 verse 18, and hold him in chains of darkness for judgment on the last day, 2 Peter 2 verse 4, Jude 1 verse 6. How can we, who were sent into the world by God to live holy lives as our respective testimonies before God and his holy angels, become as corrupt as the devil and cross boundaries that were set by God to keep everyone from infringing on the rights of others and convoluting their various exclusive gifts from God? This is why God guarantees us throughout the Bible that he will punish every one of us that breached these boundaries he had set for us in all things. That God had set boundaries around all things in our midst is why I can see you and you can see me, because boundaries mark the limit of each thing in creation. Boundary makes a creation finite and discrete. When a man is by himself, he is alone within the boundaries of his life. When the man acquires a wife for himself, he increases in number within the same boundaries that was set for him by God. And when he and his wife have children and other people to help them in their business and home, they increase yet again within the same boundaries that were set for the man by God to mark their life and territories. Acts 17, verse 26. God fiercely defends every human being's boundaries. Acts 17, verse 26. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." 23. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, "To an unknown God." So you're ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you. 24. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. 25. And he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. 26. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. 27. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. 28. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Acts 17, verses 22 to 28 NIV. God did not only set boundaries for different empires' lands. God had also set boundaries for everything in the human life through specific and clear commands in the Bible, like, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, anything that belongs to your neighbor." Exodus 20, verse 17 NIV. When God commanded all of us to never covet our neighbor's wives, it is a boundary God had set around every married man to keep all of us away from every other man's marriage. When God commanded all of us to never covet our neighbor's house, it is a boundary God had set around every man or woman to keep all of us away from every other man or woman's house. When God commanded all of us to never covet our neighbor's wealth and properties, it is a boundary he had set around every man or woman to keep all of us away from every other man or woman's wealth and properties. When God commanded all of us to never covet our neighbor's children and servants, it is a boundary he had set around every man or woman to keep every one of us away from every other man or woman's children and servants. Because life is all about relationships, all boundaries must be respected and never be breached, so that love, respect, and peace will flourish among us and make our respective testimonies against wickedness acceptable to God, and further convict the devil and the fallen angels. Since everybody needs what everybody else needs, all boundaries which God had set among all human beings in their various communities across the world must be kept clear and unabridged, to avoid butting heads with our neighbors and deeply hurting them and bringing God's judgment on ourselves, our families, and our communities. Otherwise, we will be greatly displeasing God in our infringement of other people's rights and our coveting of their possessions, which is a great sin against God and against the people whose rights we infringe on. No other boundary is devilishly crossed more times and more arrogantly than the boundary God had set around every husband and his wife's marriage. God had warned us more than 2,000 years to maintain the sacredness of the boundary around marriage. 1 Corinthians 7 verses 1 to 7 commands, "Now for the matters you wrote about, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman." 2. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relation with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. 3. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. 5. Do not deprive each other except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. 6. I say this as a concession, not as a command. 7. I wish that all of you were as I am. But each of you has your own gift from God, One has this gift, another has that. And Hebrews 13 verses 4 to 6 NIV commands, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. 5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. 6. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? But instead of obeying God, honoring marriage, and staying away from illicit sexual relations with married men and women and convoluting marriages, we became prideful and declared war on God and on marriage. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. 7. From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. 8. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance they threaten oppression. 9. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. 10. Therefore their people turn to them. 11. They say, how would God know? Does the Most High know anything? 16. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply. 17. Till I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destiny. 18. Surely you place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. 19. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. 20. They are like a dream when one awakes. When you arise, Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. Psalm 73:710-11, 16-20 NIV. Recently, I started spending more time on social media to figure out how to position my scriptural science presentations to the world. And social media being the good, the bad, and the totally outrageous, I espouse so many videos on infidelity in marriages. Inasmuch as many of these videos were repetitive, they offer great insight into the diversity of problems in our marriages today. All infidelity is disturbing even when it happens to someone that is not you. A lot of what I see on social media troubled my heart, and some over many days. In one of these troubling videos, a so-called rich man was caught sleeping with his driver's wife in a hotel room. And instead of this man becoming repentant and pleading with his driver for forgiveness for regularly defiling his wife in hotel rooms across town, this arrogant sinner angrily rebuked his driver for leaving the office while he was on his boss pay to interrupt his boss' rest in the hotel room with the young driver's wife. And the driver was visibly shaken up at his boss barking, for fear of losing his job by standing up to this unthinking sinner, who was abusing him by sleeping with his wife and shamelessly claiming in his face that he had earned the right to sleep with the woman, because the driver's wife had consented to sleeping with him any time he calls her to come to him in exchange for a salary increase for her husband from $70,000 per month to $250,000 per month. The driver despairingly raised his hand to hit his useless wife, who was clinging to his leg and begging that he would forgive her for betraying him. His boss immediately barked at him to make sure he did not hit his own wife, who had gone behind his back and arranged to regularly sleep with his boss for money. And as soon as the unrepentant boss barked at his driver, the driver moved away from his wife, with more frustration showing on his face as he cried in pain and wiped tears off his eyes. The wicked boss claimed in his arrogance that the driver's wife did nothing wrong. He explained that the married woman was covering an area her husband could not cover to increase the money that was coming into their household. Please note that the driver's wife was not employed by his husband's boss. Her only contract with her husband's boss was sleeping with him in exchange for an increase in her husband's salary, which the wicked boss shamelessly explained was a division of labor between his driver and his driver's wife. The driver drives him around, and the driver's wife takes care of his sexual needs, and everybody wins. Hooray! And when the media personnel who helped the driver broke into the hotel room to catch his wife in the act with his boss, suggested to the wicked boss to marry the driver's wife and have her legally to himself, instead of sneaking around with her from hotel to hotel. The wicked boss replied that he has a wife of his own and is not looking to marry another wife because he is a Christian. Wow! He added that the driver's wife was one of his toys who help him relax his body and reduce his blood pressure. He really called the woman his toy in her presence, and the woman did not make even a whimper in protest for being called a toy, demonstrating how low she had brought herself and her husband by selling out her husband behind his back. She brought her husband a higher salary, but cost him his dignity. It troubled me more that this evil boss was using God's name in vain, a Christian. What an absurdity and a miscarriage of justice for the poor and the needy in society. But that is the human beings we have chosen to become, instead of respecting God imposed boundaries on marriage and on all other human relationships, and promoting love, respect, and peace in our communities as God has purposed and commanded us.